I've been doing some deep inner child work lately, and I wanted to share a realization that I've been having. I made the decision late last year that I was going to take at least a year before dating. Since I was 15, I haven't stayed single for more than 6 months at max. Usually it's more like 3 months before I hop into another relationship. And I've known this has been a way that I have escaped things that I didn't want to feel, specifically loneliness, being alone. But I haven't understood why it was so hard for me to break that pattern. So that's part of what drove me to choose to make the decision to stay single. It's been a up and down experience. I have been the most mentally stable and happy, like not from external things, but happy from my own sense of inner beingness. I've been like happier and more stable mentally, emotionally than I ever have in my entire life. So that's a huge plus and a reason to continue. I've really found a lot of things to invest myself in that has been about me, which is lovely. And it's also been hard to face that loneliness because the truth of it is, I don't have a sense of family right now. And I realized that's what is the hardest thing about being single. I realized that is the hardest thing about not falling back into patterns of codependency, which is a pattern that haunted me in my relationships and another part of the reason I'm staying single. So I can heal the parts of me that have been falling into codependent dynamics or seeking to engage in codependent type behavior patterns. And because I wasn't raised in a family, I don't come from a family that does a lot of emotional processing or intimate sharing. Authenticity isn't really something that is understood or prioritized or valued in my family system. Because of that, as someone who is highly sensitive and who really needs like a lot of depthful emotional connection to feel connected at all, like that's why I've been pursuing the romantic relationship. It's been hard for me to find that in friendship spaces. I'm neurodivergent and just a very unique person, so it's been a challenge for me to find in friendship situations. But I could always find somebody who was really emotionally interested in me and really wanted to get to know deep, deep, deep parts of me through romance, through dating, through being an object of sexual interest. And I want to be really honest about this and transparent about this because I think this is really common. I think there's a lot of us who use romance, who use sexual relationships, who use dating as a way to feed our sense of self-worth, as a way to get that need for emotional connection met, as a way to feel the sense of intimacy we're meant to experience through family. And when I'm talking about family, I'm not just talking about like the nuclear unit version of family that we understand to be true in this country. I'm not talking about like a mom and a dad and children. I'm talking about the sense of a village. I'm talking about the sense of people who are intimate and close to you. So I'm using the word family, but I'm speaking to a feeling more than like family as a noun. I'm speaking to family as a verb because there's a feeling that I have come to recognize in some of the spaces that I am exploring community right now. There's a feeling of family that I'm starting to be able to sense that can be created in community, that can be created through relationality, that has nothing to do with bloodline, it's nothing to do with family roles, none of that. There's a sense of care, compassion, and it's really about a space where people are seen, a space where people are understood, a space where people are encouraged to be their authentic selves and loved for it. Like that, I think to me is like the core of what is family. It's a space where who I am innately and naturally, who I am is seen, like the other people see it. They make an effort to understand it, understand who I am. And that's why they love me. They love me for who I am. Like that's what we're supposed to do with children, right? We're supposed to connect with them. We're supposed to understand them. We're supposed to step in their world and help them discover who they are as people. And we're supposed to love them for who they are so they can grow up knowing that who they are is beautiful and natural and who they're meant to be. That's not something our culture often provides us because we live in a culture that wants to prescribe who we're supposed to be. So I, like many others, didn't get as much of that from my family as I needed to. Even though I always knew I was loved, that didn't always mean that I was seen or understood or connected with in the ways that really foster a capacity to blossom into who we are as human beings. It was something I did find through friends when I was younger, but then through the process of adolescence, there were a lot of rules about who I was allowed to be and who I was supposed to be. I think that's true for, again, all of us in the socialization process we go through in this culture. And so I didn't get that from my peers in the ways that I needed to. In some ways I did, and in a lot of ways I didn't, especially as I entered my early 20s, especially as I pursued a career path, I became a professional. There wasn't space for family level connections in most of the social spaces that I was in, again, at least in the ways that I needed it to be. So I found it in romantic relationships. So I don't know, there's a lot to unpack here, and I feel like I've shared a lot, that there's a lot of pathways to explore from the things that I've shared, but the reason I'm sharing it for me for today is because it's helping me put into context some of the feelings of loneliness that I'm working with through this process of choosing to be consciously single, because that's the hardest thing. Like that's been the biggest barrier that has blocked me from choosing to be single in the past. It's the thing I was most afraid of. It is hard and it hurts. It's not as bad as I thought it would be. So let that be encouraging. It's not as bad as I thought it would be. Again, I've really been focused on building a life for myself that brings me joy and that brings me fulfillment, even in the absence of that kind of family feel connection that my heart of hearts ultimately wants. But I know this is a time to focus on me before walking back towards that. So it's been helping me to it helps me to understand my emotions. I think it's just helpful for a lot of us when we know why we're feeling what we're feeling. For me, at least, it gives me more space to be able to hold it for myself. I am less likely to lose myself in the waves of the emotion because I can understand and provide context for it. I think that's true universally. So if we can understand, here's the point. If we can understand why the feeling of, why the longing for connection is so big, is so intense, maybe for you, like it is for me, there's a core underlying need for family within that. If we can understand that what we're actually craving might be a family connection more than anything, it can help us loosen up a little bit in terms of how we need to create it for ourselves. It can help us make different choices about is this something we really want to get through? Is this a need that we want to get met through a romantic relationship? Is this a need that we're throwing on to one particular friend and expecting that friend to fill a giant hole that's meant for family to fill? Are we asking too much from people? That's the way that I have fallen into trouble in the past with this. I think that feeds the codependency for sure. If we can start asking those kinds of questions and gain that understanding of what this need actually is, which for me, it's a need for family. It helps me understand that I'm learning how to meet that need for myself in a different way, because I'm gonna build a village of family for myself differently than I'm gonna try and fall in love with one individual person. So it allows some diversity in terms of who I'm expecting to meet my emotional needs, my relational needs, and it allows me more power and more empowerment, because instead of putting all my eggs again in the basket of one person, whether it be romantic or friendship, instead of doing that, I can find community spaces. I can explore different options for what are spaces that help me feel that type of family connection? What are the spaces that can meet this need? What are the spaces that can help me learn more about how to meet this need for myself so I don't fall into crappy relationships, so I don't end up in unhealthy situations for myself, so I can maintain empowerment and focus and direction in my life. That's all.